Hi, everyone, and welcome to the live panel discussion of the film NORMIE. I'm Sandy Schultz, Vice President of Specialized Services at Vinfen, and I'm stepping in as the moderator today for Dr. Shannon Shea. I'm excited to introduce our panelists to you, so without further ado, here are Annemarie Carrigan, Pat Carrigan, Kathleen Crawford, and Dr. Brian Skotko. You will all recognize Annemarie from the film, but here's a little more about her. Annemarie is the main star of NORMIE, and she is also a blogger, self-advocate, and activist, working to promote inclusive opportunities for people of all abilities. And her dream includes being the first woman with Down syndrome to become a journalist or reporter at a major daily news platform. Sitting next to Annemarie is Pat Carrigan. Pat is Annemarie's father and is a finance professional who enjoys volunteering for his church, mentoring, and being a disability and mental health advocate. Our third panelist is Kathleen Crawford. Kathleen served as the former chair of Vinfen's Family Advisory Council for over 10 years. She has a sister who is a person with Down syndrome, and along with her extended family, Kathleen believes that people with mental health challenges or disabilities have unique and important perspectives on essential program services, policies, and advocacy. And last but not least, I'm pleased to introduce Dr. Brian Skotko. Dr. Skotko is a board-certified medical geneticist and is the Emma Campbell Endowed Chair on Down Syndrome at Massachusetts General Hospital. He is the director of the hospital's Down Syndrome program and has dedicated his professional energies toward children with cognitive and developmental disabilities. Dr. Skotko has a sister with Down syndrome and serves on the honorary board of directors for the Massachusetts Down Syndrome Congress. Thank you all for being here today. To get us started, Annemarie, I wanted to ask you a question. I loved the movie and was really impressed with your honesty as it related to some of the struggles you deal with, particularly around being lonely and how much that hurts you. Can you tell us about where you are today?
Yeah, where I am today, I am currently living in Dallas, Texas, without a roommate, and very temporary situation right now, but I still am battling loneliness and being around my family.
Great, thanks. And I know when we had chatted earlier, Annemarie, you had told us that I know you're working. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do for work?
Yes, of course. Well, I work as a receptionist / editorial support for a major literary agency called Dupree Miller here in Dallas, Texas.
Great, thank you. Pat, a question for you. Annemarie was pretty clear in the movie that she wanted to know all about her diagnosis. How was it telling her, and how did you do it? And I also wonder, is there anything that doctors could have done differently that maybe would have prepared you better?
Well, we did it over time, I would say, and not terribly easily either, but Annemarie was really quick to start asking questions about Down syndrome. She was very quick adopting the internet and so forth. So she just had a really high learning curve. So she was asking tough questions we were talking about it last night. We think about 10 or 11, and we really didn't hold much back. And, but it was a process of years, sort of just repeating and trying to get across what Down syndrome is and what it isn't. Not a disease, it's a trait, you know, that sort of thing. As far as did doctors help us with that specific place, I would say no. I would say there were other support groups that gave us feedback, gave us input, but you know, everyone is just so different. That's the main message that I would have from other parent friends, that we all kind of have a different viewpoint on it.
Great, thank you. Kathleen, over the years, there's been a great deal of advocacy to allow people with disabilities access to the same risks and freedoms as everyone else. Have you struggled with this, and how do you find a balance?
Let's see. The short answer is I have struggled with this, but the older I get and the older my sister Eileen gets, the more I recognize that she should have every opportunity and be given plenty of latitude to discover for herself what her I hate, what's the opposite of limitations? I want her to be able to continue to kind of see the sky as the limit. I'm the oldest in my family, and she is 18 years younger than I. In fact, she entered the world when I was a freshman in college. So I had a very different idea about what she might be able to do. My mom, both my parents were very, very strong advocates for Eileen, and my mom in particular was voracious in learning as much as she could. And similar to what you said, Pat, the community that surrounded us was very, very helpful in pointing out that yes, it's a trait. It's a trait, and there's such variety in terms of what people are capable of doing, and they should explore capabilities as much as they want to, in my opinion.
Pat and Annemarie, can you jump in on that before we get to Dr. Skotko? How have you negotiated that, the struggles of safety versus risks and freedoms?
Well, again, boy, it's day by day. Annemarie pushes the envelope all the time, and I think we're pretty liberal in the sense of what we let Annemarie do. I know some parents probably think we're crazy, but Annemarie says, "What do you say about me? I'm the most
codependent father I ever have."
Yeah. So I said, okay. But it's, it's a fine line. But Annemarie's mother is extremely encouraging and empowering
Yes.
in what she can do. And so it's worked for us for the most part to be very, very open-minded about her capacity to do different things.
Great, thanks. And Dr. Skotko, I'm going to give you a wide open question. I'm wondering if you could share reactions to what the previous panelists have said.
Well, I wanted to thank Annemarie for being so honest in the film. Oftentimes in media, people with Down syndrome can be portrayed as perfect all the time, perfect angels. Oh my goodness, how cute they are overall. And those descriptions, well, I don't want to take that away, all the good qualities from people with Down syndrome we know, it can be belittling, and I think it could be two-dimensional. And I think what happens when we try to make everything seem perfect, we become more detached. And those on the outside say, well, I can never be like them, and they're the other. And Annemarie, the gift you gave us is you're three-dimensional. You showed all the struggles, and you showed with honesty and clarity that people with Down syndrome are experiencing all of the highs and all of the challenges of life. And in doing so, I think it makes all the rest of us who don't have Down syndrome be able to actually relate more. And you help people understand people with Down syndrome more because we could identify the fact that we all have struggles. We're all on this road together. And I just want to thank you for being so honest.
Thank you.
Thanks. So this question's directed to all of you. So whoever wants to jump in, please do. But after watching the film, I think all of us questioned what is normal. Right, that's the title of the film, Normie. So I'm wondering now, from your perspective, do you believe in the concept of normality?
I'll just jump in that normality is so boring, right? Who wants that? And I don't think anyone before or during or especially after this movie wants to be normal. It's really identifying the exceptionalities that make us all unique. And those could be all the unique positive attributes, or it could be the struggles that we have and what we learn at the other end. People with Down syndrome all have the same extra chromosome, but people with Down syndrome are as different as they are alike, and they're as diverse as the rest of us. And I think what this film demonstrates is We cannot assume we know what the other person's likes or dislikes are, and it's up to that person to articulate those clearly. So I think this film has definitively established how great it is not to be normal.
Thank you. Others?
Well, there are a couple of quotes in the movie that particularly appeal to me, and I've watched it more than once so that I could. The first time that I watched the film, I had a series of impressions, and then I watched it again. But this idea of what is normal, I think, is very limiting, as Brian said. And so the quote that really appealed to me was the one from Vincent van Gogh. "Normality is a paved road. It is comfortable to walk, but no flowers grow." And so when I think of that, and I even look at Anne-Marie sitting on the couch there, or look at Anne-Marie's interview with Dr. Phil, which some folks who watched the film, I'm sure hasn't seen yet, that there's such variety. There's such variety, and we should be very, very careful not to presume the first time that we might meet somebody who has the particular facial characteristics of Down syndrome that they belong in a particular slot or particular category. Because I also don't know Anne-Marie very well, but I will say that she's very, very different than my sister, even though physically they may have some characteristics in common. That is where the similarity ends.
And Pat and Anne-Marie, or Anne-Marie in particular, I guess, going into the film, when you had this concept of normal or normie, how did that change for you after filming was over and maybe you saw the entire film put together?
When I saw the film put it all together, it made me realize that I am just like anyone else out there. That I am accepted as who I am.
Absolutely. Pat, anything you want to add to that, or as far as your concept of normal and normality?
Well, there were just so many characters in the film, for sure, that it was great being around these very different folks. And yeah, I mean, we had so much fun making the film in being able to interact with people of all sorts and shapes and sizes across the country. I just think it was a great process for Anne-Marie, and it was for me, to realize, to just to get out of our own little world and bubble a little bit, and do away with that normal comparison thing.
Is that the primary purpose of why you made the film? Or what made you want to make the film?
Well, the producer of the film, it was his genius, and he's known Anne-Marie since she was a baby. And he is a impassioned guy, and we met with him yesterday, and he said, I would just say that I made the film because I wanted people to realize that, God made all of us special, and, we just we do well when we don't put people in boxes, and we just we celebrate our specialness. And it was about love. He would say that it's about love. It's about loving all people.
That came across in the film for sure.
Yeah.
Dr. Skotko, did you want to share something?
Pat and Anne-Marie, I think you also reminded us through the film how much of this concept of disability is a social construction and not a medical one. I'm a medical geneticist, so I love science, right? But so much of what gets in the way is not our genetics, it's not our biology, it's not the things that we, quote, go to the hospital for, but it's other human beings, it's the social inequities that get in the way. And the same person with the same diagnosis could have remarkably different opportunities depending on where you live and where you're born. And it was just so nice to see you to be able to peel back those social limitations like Kathleen was talking about and find your expectations. And it was so great to see your community and the people you interviewed really kind of embrace that acceptance and that otherness. And I think we all acknowledge that people with Down syndrome around the world aren't as lucky. And sometimes it's the social limitations that get in the way.
So here's another question for all of you. So again, you can all jump in, but obviously it will differ from person to person on how we support people going through the process of accepting or internalizing their diagnosis. So again, different from person to person, but how have you all dealt with that? So Pat, how did you work to share with Annemarie her diagnosis? And I'd be interested to hear, Kathleen, how you shared with your sister, and Dr. Skotko, any experiences you've had.
Well, when Annemarie first brought it up in her unique way, I remember it was at a breakfast table. She came down before school and she announced, she said, "Dad, I think you guys made a mistake." She said, "What is that?" She said, "I don't think I have Down syndrome." And so that was an interesting way to start the conversation, because we had to say, well, you know, why do you think that? Of course. And then we said, you know, well, we had testing done that showed that you do have Down syndrome. And Annemarie sort of just accepted that. And that was it for that conversation. And then I think a week later, Annemarie came down and said, well, I've been investigating and I think I have mosaic Down syndrome. And we said, oh, what makes you think that? And what did make you think that?
Because I'm so high functioning.
Oh, okay.
And because of the help of Evan, I thought I'm so high functioning and intelligent. I thought I had mosaic.
Oh, because she has a really smart uncle. So I guess she thought that, I don't know. There were lots of things to discuss. And it was just over time and dripping. And I think we're still in that process of helping Annemarie to accept her Down syndrome. But as I say, the friend we were with last night, who has a 13-year-old said, thank you, that she's never brought it up. He doesn't even think she knows what Down syndrome is. So it's just all so different.
Kathleen or Dr. Skotko?
Well, Annemarie, now I see why you're going to be a journalist, or why you are a journalist. It sounds like you are quite the researcher.
Yeah.
So two things come to mind when I think about your question, Sandy. First is the night my sister was born. I had intended to celebrate her birth with my roommates. I bought a bottle of champagne, but she didn't come early enough in the day, and I had to study for a chemistry exam. So they celebrated for us, and I went to the study hall down the hall from our dorm room, and I did my studying. I came back, and one of my roommates was unable to get into her upper bunk, so I put her to bed in my bed, and I climbed into the upper bunk, went to sleep. The alarm went off the next morning, and I stepped out of bed, forgetting that I was up there, and I wasn't hurt. But something came to me in my mind that this person had entered our world, our family world, and that it was never going to be the same. So I'll start you off with that. But more to the point of your question, Sandy, was as my siblings had their own children and our nieces and nephews. Eileen and I have 10 nieces and nephews who range in age from early 20s to mid 30s now. And as they were younger, Eileen observed that their milestones, if you will, or the things that they were doing, seemed to be passing her by. And she asked a lot of questions about what that, what does that mean? Why can't I do that thing? Or why can't I go to this place? Or whatever have you. So we had it broke my heart to have her notice that, to notice limitations, to notice that she wasn't making similar progress to them. And I acknowledged that. I was pretty honest, but I also wanted to balance it with the ways in which she was similar, or she did have the same capacity. So it certainly wasn't a single conversation, but over time, we had multiple conversations about what it might mean. It was so important to me that her self-esteem remain intact as best it could, as best I could help it be. And I don't think I really contributed much of anything, because she has always been a very confident young person. I say young again because she's much younger than I.
Dr. Skotko, any thoughts?
I resonate with what Kathleen and Pat said. It shouldn't be a one-time conversations, but a series of dialogues kind of stretched over time. My team and I in the Down syndrome program at Mass General Hospital, we see close to 600 patients with Down syndrome every year. And everyone is unique, everyone is different, and everyone has a slightly different level of self-awareness. But we firmly believe that everyone has a right to understand themselves at the extent that they want to, and at an understanding that's appropriate for them. So there are all sorts of resources, from books to materials to psychosocial supports, to make sure that the person with Down syndrome could understand themselves at the level that they want to. Many people with Down syndrome do go through a period of struggle, wrestling with their own diagnosis, and they have a right to do so, just like all of us have a right to be frustrated with any sort of medical diagnoses that we get. But it's important to know that there are people, there are resources, and there are organizational supports to allow the person to come to their own true understanding of what it means for them to have the diagnosis.
Great, thank you. So we have some folks from the audience writing in some questions, and one of the first ones that came in is for you, Annemarie. They're wondering how your life has changed since the movie was made. How do you see yourself now, and if you still use the term normie?
So
That was a lot.
Let's back it up a little bit. Let's go with the first question.
Perfect. So how has your life changed since the movie was made?
My life has changed, and for the good, since the movie was made. I ended up living with 2 roommates. I lost both of them due to COVID, and that's pretty much.
Just moved out. Didn't lose permanently.
Gotcha.
Yes.
And do you still use the term normie?
I do, yes, a little bit, because the way that I described it is the people in my group that has Down syndrome is Down syndrome, but the people outside of my group is what I call normies, because they're not like me, they're normal people.
Gotcha. Dr. Skotko, this one came in for you. Some folks are wondering, what are other common health issues that one could experience with Down syndrome? And they're wondering about the different level of language skills associated with Down syndrome.
We're so lucky, thanks to clinicians and researchers that continue to invest their brains and their hearts and their souls in terms of researching how best to support people with Down syndrome. We actually have a medical playbook that's been written by the American Academy of Pediatrics, and a similar one written for adults. So we know some of the co-occurring conditions that can appear at any point along the way: hearing challenge, eye challenge, thyroid issues, endocrine issues, et cetera. And it's working closely with physicians to try to anticipate those and try to proactively do things about them to make sure they don't get in the way. So many of the co-occurring conditions that go along with Down syndrome are treatable and are addressable. So it really is working closely with clinicians. In terms of expressive language skills, people with Down syndrome, we don't put any limitations. We know that people with Down syndrome can and do continue to learn from a very young age. They do benefit from speech and language therapy. Different people with different with Down syndrome have different levels of expressive language challenges, but we're there to work with them either with their speech therapist, and many people with Down syndrome are also utilizing augmentative communication or technologies to be able to allow their voices to be heard.
Great, thank you. Annemarie and Pat, have you found any strategies that help you combat feeling lonely? And then there's a follow-up once we get that. I'll read it to you now and I can go back. So what advice would you give to others who experience that feeling? So I guess the first question again, any strategies have you found, Annemarie, that help you not feel as lonely?
Blogging, writing, reading, a lot of reading. I escape my life while I'm reading. So that's pretty much it.
Coffee shops.
Coffee shops. Yeah.
We live, she can walk to Starbucks a block away.
Yes.
And she goes there fairly often.
Fairly often, yes. And I use my coffee maker too.
Exercise. That's more mine.
Yeah.
Kathleen, folks wanted to know, what do you want people to know about how best to advocate for people with Down syndrome?
I would say well, there are many, many early intervention programs. It depends on one stage of life. And I mean the stage of life of the person that you love or the person that you're interested in. So there are many early intervention programs. There are so many, we're very fortunate in Massachusetts to have such a plethora of opportunities to interact with other family members, other parents, certainly social service agencies like Vinfen. You could throw a rock and probably hit something that would be applicable to providing some kind of support, or just opening up the array of what's available. And it depends on personal interests too. I referred to my mother before, and she, in an interest of educating herself, she made sure that she reached out to the agencies that were closest geographically, but she also was able to get some referrals very, very early on. So my sister needed some supports in terms of some of her physical milestones early on, early childhood milestones. So there's lots and lots of things out there. And I think that family members can be the best advocates to start with, for sure, because, and that was another thing my mother did really well. She made sure that every single one of Eileen's siblings had some connection to some social service agency or volunteer opportunity. And it made a huge difference in all of our lives. Not for nothing, my brothers would call out some of their friends for making sometimes disparaging remarks, not realizing that that we had somebody at home that we loved who had a similar situation. And it was remarkable when they were teenagers. So anyway.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Pat, were you gonna say something?
Yeah, I can't resist a plug for one organization, especially since the director is one of your fellow Bostonians. And it's the Best Buddies organization.
Oh, yes.
That's been a very important part of Annemarie's life. She's an ambassador for them. And to this day, it's a really big help for her. Now it even is helping her with her job. They have, occupational counselors.
Mhm.
It's gone on from middle school on to present. And that's Anthony Kennedy Shriver's the director.
Yes. My own sister had a buddy when she was in high school, and she had another one when she was college age, a young woman who she was friends with throughout her time at Boston University. So she had a buddy who stayed with her for 4 years. It's a great organization.
Yes.
Dr. Skotko, folks are wondering what led you to work in the field. Was it always a calling for you?
I have two great sisters, one of whom has Down syndrome, and she's all grown up now, 40 years old, and her name is Kristen, and she's to thank and blame for a lot of my professional life. But along the way, growing up as a sibling, we went to parties, we went to fundraisers, and I was just born and raised in the advocacy movement, and I know life no other way, nor would I want to know life any other way. And I was just so fortunate when I came to medical school in Massachusetts, I had an opportunity to be involved in so many of the advocacy organizations that we have here, to meet so many of the families that we have here, become a doctor, become a medical geneticist, and now a director. So the advocacy movement raised me in many ways. It's just my opportunity now to contribute my skill set back.
Pat, what would you tell to a new parent with a child with Down syndrome?
Oh gosh, I would say try not to live in the future, or future tripping, as the producer of Normie calls it. It's just day by day, and you just have a wonderful opportunity ahead of you, and you just have to take it a day at a time. And you will be equipped with whatever abilities that you need to have as a parent. And you just, like everything, you think back all the times that you worried, and you didn't need to have worried, spend all that time worrying. Things work out.
Thanks. Dr. Skotko, do you have any thoughts on that?
I do, but if I could, I would love to ask Pat and Annemarie a question if I could. I see a lot of people when they're pregnant coming to me and they have a diagnosis of Down syndrome for their fetus. And I was wondering, Annemarie and Pat, what message would you like pregnant couples to take from Normie? And I would just love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, currently I am actually writing a book for young mothers going through pregnancies with Down syndrome. And I'm not trying to publicize the book or anything.
Plug it.
That's right.
Yes. So I am writing that to help ensure young mothers to know that they're not alone with being pregnant a Down syndrome baby. But with Normie per se, I really hope young parents come across that they're not normal, and that just take it day by day. Just be wording it, what my dad said about doing it day by day, and just take it one time at a time.
Thank you for sharing that. When pregnant couples come to me, I increasingly find that they want authenticity. So they know when you're sugarcoating things and you're trying to put a twist onto it. And I really love the fact, Annemarie, that you and everyone in the cast of Normie really, again, tell it like it is. And I think that authenticity really resonates with many of the viewers who are either pregnant or might be pregnant in the future.
Pat, did you have anything to add, or Annemarie summarized it pretty well?
Yeah, I think that parents should definitely do everything they can to tap into others, and don't try to go it alone, but tap in organizations, find other parents that have Down syndrome kids, and just network and share, because there's a lot of strength there.
Great. Dr. Skotko, another one for you. There's lots of questions about the future of science and what role that should or would play. What would you want the public to know or consider?
You know, I think it's so important that people with Down syndrome and their loved ones play a role in science. You know, my team and I were fortunate enough to get a grant where we worked on a research project where people with Down syndrome and their family members joined us as co-researchers. So if we are going to work on advances in science, we need the involvement of families and people with Down syndrome. Science it has so much potential, and it's a matter of what we do with it and how we apply it. I'm so grateful for all of the advocates out there who continue to ask that there are more funding opportunities available to invest in the future of people with Down syndrome. It's thanks to advances in science that we know how to better surgically correct hearts. It's based to advances in science. We know how to better treat leukemia that occurs in some people with Down syndrome. So thanks to investments in science, we really are making today even better than it is yesterday for people with Down syndrome, but we have to continue to do it together.
Thank you. Annemarie, someone wants to know, what was the most challenging part about being in the documentary?
Crying on film. Crying on film.
I will say, as an audience member or as a viewer, we felt for you when you did that as well. It really, your ability to be so authentic and real is what made the film for me.
I agree.
Kathleen, someone's curious to know about collaboration or support for families. Is there family therapy, or are family members included in the individual therapy process?
I actually have relatively recent experience with that. My sister Eileen wanted to pursue therapy for herself, and she and I went on her therapeutic visits. If you're asking about, I presume you're asking about psychological therapy, person who's asking the question. And if that's the case, then I can say that that Eileen and I had regular bi-weekly visits with a psychologist to help her work through some anger and some frustration that she was having in her life. And most of the appointment was one-on-one for her, but in the latter part of the session, I was invited in, and we would talk about some of the things that she was experiencing and feeling and some coping strategies. And so part of that was so that I could remind her when she was having those feelings that she had these tools at her disposal. It was also very enlightening for me because she, I think, my sister was exceptionally candid with her therapist, and I learned some things with her permission that I wasn't aware of. So it was really very, very helpful.
Great.
We had the same experience, Kathleen.
Did you?
Yeah, we're both huge consumers of counseling and don't know what we would have done without it.
But isn't that so encouraging? It's so great to know that if you're having a period of time where things are not going the way that you would hope that they would, that these outlets are available. It certainly was to me, and now I'm going to cry, Annemarie. It just made me feel so hopeful and that I could help my sister through a difficult time.
You know, it's so important that we give people with Down syndrome the opportunity to achieve mental wellness as well, right?
Yes.
So health is more than just your thyroid gland or your heart. Those are important organs, but mental wellness is important. And it's so frustrating when I hear from some families who've been told, oh, that's the way people with Down syndrome are, or that's the way they get when they get older. That is so not true. People with Down syndrome, there's so much diagnostic overshadowing that we just hitch on to the diagnosis, but people with Down syndrome can and do and must deserve access to mental health and wellness resources just like the rest of us. It is such a critical part for so many families.
Annemarie, someone wants to know about a possible tour. So they know COVID's a limitation, but would you ever consider doing a tour with the movie or going into schools to talk about it?
I never thought of doing that really per se, because with the details of it, like the transportation, that would be a huge problem to talk about with I'm assuming the question would lead to if you want just me to do it, or if you want my dad to come, or the producer of NORMIE when it comes, or I don't know how that will work out.
Yeah, it's a little bigger, right? What about local schools? Have you ever gone into some of the local schools and shown the film and then talked about it?
We did it with organizations, but not in schools.
We did a number of film festivals and a handful of conferences and then around the country.
Okay.
And I mean, it probably showed a dozen times in the North Texas area, different organizations, but I wouldn't say we're through. We're always open invitations.
Yes.
We like that. Worked out for us, so thank you. Annemarie, people wanted to know, do you keep in touch with any of the other children that were in the film with you? Your bond with Palmer, they thought was beautiful.
Yeah.
We do fairly often. Ever since this COVID happened, kind of put a strain on being around them.
Yeah.
That will pick back up though.
Yeah. Yes.
With Palmer.
Yeah.
She's doing great, by the way.
Yes.
Yay, thanks for sharing. This is for the full panel. How can we all do a better job to ensure inclusion and integration into our communities and our workplaces?
It's a huge question, but to break it down into a simple step, I would say tap into your personal narrative, right? If you have a loved one with Down syndrome or another disability, when you feel those moments of frustration, you know, after you get through that event, how do you turn those into teachable moments? And the way that our societies get better is step by step, narrative by narrative. We are just trying to share our human experience and make it a little bit better for everyone else. And to the extent you can, and to the extent it's safe, continue to be authentic, because I think that's the way that we all move forward together. Be my recommendation.
Great. Others?
You know, one thought I had was that again, what to say to new parents, it's amazing that it's almost like you become a part of an extended family. And I can't tell you the people that when I have a question, I just keep a log of parents that I've met. And sometimes I want to talk to them for 5 years and I'll call them up and they'll spend an hour on the phone with me. It's just like a fraternity or a sorority we have, sort of a thing, or a family's a better, of sharing that parents just do with ideas and networks.
Pat, can I ask, when you were, I know Annemarie was so authentic, but it also required you and your larger life to be authentic. Did you have any special considerations going through your mind before you agreed to allow some intimate moments to be broadcast through the documentary?
Oh yeah. Yeah, there were some long conversations between Annmarie's mom and myself. And there were some things that we frankly chose not to go into. Yeah, it was tough. Annemarie was the one who encouraged us to let it all hang out, so to speak.
So Annemarie, you shared a little bit of this with us as far as writing and reading, but others wanted to know, are there other ways that you can take care of yourself, or that you do take care of yourself physically, emotionally, and your mental health?
So to start off is from a mental state and emotional state is reading, because if I read, I escape my reality for a couple of hours and I just that follow the story. And that helps me with my emotional and mental state to calm my mind down from any struggles I'm going through. But with physical, I would say working out to help my physical state, and just try to do what I call a get my shit together. And I get my shit together one day a week.
Perfect.
How do you do that?
I clean my apartment. I do my laundry. I just bowls out, watch TV, and just do that.
Great.
Eat a lot. So.
Well,
That's
unfortunately, that's right. Well, unfortunately, that wraps up our time here for the panel discussion, but I want to thank those of you in the audience who submitted your questions, and a special thanks, obviously, to our panelists today for sharing your time, your thoughts and experiences. We really appreciate it. Please enjoy a 30-minute lunch break and return promptly at 11:50 for the film Bedlam, followed by a live panel discussion. Thank you all.